I'm not going to show any video today. I just wanted to jump straight into probably the biggest talking point of the weekend, which centred around two particular issues. The first being high tackles and the second issue being sin binning of high tackles. So, I mean, obviously the topic for discussion, or the discussion across the course of the weekend, was driven primarily because of an incorrect decision in one game, which then kind of coloured the discussion for the rest of the weekend about players hitting other players high and whether they're sin binned or whether they're not. So I just thought, before we talk specifically about any of those things and answer any questions about it, it's probably just worthwhile having a look at this chart, which just gives a little bit of a picture of what's happening at the moment. And you can see this is high tackles penalties by round, the number of penalties given by referees in each round going back to the start of the season. And you can see it kind of in the middle here, or all the way through until recently. It all kind of hovers around this 15 or so mark. And then over the last four or five rounds, you can see it starts to jump up to 18, 27, 27 and 30. So we've definitely seen a spike in high tackles that the referees have had to take action on during games. Now, I don't really know why that is. I can only assume that it's got something to do with the intensity of games leading into finals. Obviously, teams are desperate to win and to maintain their position either in the 8 or force their way into the 8, and that is maybe leading to some misjudgment by players because of the intensity of the games. But regardless of the reason, we have seen that spike and been reasonably consistent throughout the year, but you can see just looking at that chart, it's really jumped up over the last few weeks. So that's just for some context about what's happening at the moment in the area of high tackles. The second thing I wanted to do was just take you through some information that, again, might just give some greater context to what's happening. I think what tends to happen is when we have an error, and a bad error that we saw in the Stephen Crichton incident, which should have been sin binned. I don't think there's any question. I don't think anyone argues with that. There's no doubt that was a judgment error by the bunker and should have been sin binned. But that tends to then create this impression that the referees are all over the shop with sin bins, the bunker's all over the shop with sin bins, and it's not necessarily the case. Of course, we want to see all of these decisions correct, and we're striving, and the referees are striving as much as possible to look for consistency in how they adjudicate on these types of tackles. I mean, obviously we don't want to see high tackles at all, but inevitably they do happen. When they do happen, we want to try and make sure that the referees are adjudicating as consistently as possible and know what type of tackle results in a penalty, what type of tackle results in a sin bin, what type of tackle results in a send-off, which we have seen only a few, relatively few. And most of these things are accidents. I've talked about that on a number of occasions. But let me just take you through some data that kind of just demonstrates a few things. So let's have a look at the round just completed, given that that's been a big topic of conversation in round 25. So there were 30 penalties for high tackles in round 25. 10 of those 30 were charged by the match review committee. So 20 of them weren't. And again, we're trying to show that not every high tackle results in a player being sent to the sin bin. There's a bit of a perception around at the moment, if it's a high tackle, player automatically goes to the sin bin. And that's not always the case, because a lot of them are minor, relatively minor contact. It might flick across a player's head, or it might be minor incidental contact that gets penalised and nothing more needs to happen. So, not every high tackle is going to result in a sin bin, or a charge for that matter. So 30 penalties for high tackles, 10 of the 30 were charged by the match review committee. So a high number of charges this weekend for high tackles. 6 of the 10 that were charged were sin binned, so 60% of them. 5 of the 6 of those that were sin binned were grade 2. So they were more serious adjudicated by the match review committee. So the match review committee and the referees were on a reasonably similar page when it comes to most of these tackles. 4 of the 5 Grade 2 charges were sin binned. So, and of course the one that wasn't is the one that we're talking about, the Stephen Crichton one. So if we accept that that was an error, no one's disputing that, it's an error, then the referees were, across the rest of the round, were consistent in how they adjudicated on these tackles, putting them in the sin bin, and then that's reaffirmed by the match review committee, who have charged with Grade 2, which is obviously one of the more serious charges. Grade 1 being for most of these things that are charged and, where we have penalties and no charges, they are generally the Grade 1 or no charge type offences. And then if we just go back and have a look at the whole season, just to kind of extrapolate this out across the whole season, 342 penalties for high tackles. Again, only 27 of them sin binned or sent off, so a lot of high tackles just penalised, no further action required. 23 of the 27 were Grade 2 or Grade 3, so Grade 2 or higher, and 18 of the 23 Grade 2 or Grade 3 charges were sin binned or sent off. That's almost 80% of that last category. 18 of the 23 Grade 2, Grade 3 charges were sin binned or sent off. Now, of course, we would like this to be higher. 80%'s not good enough. We need to be getting much closer to, a perfect score here about having charges or tackles that are considered to be the more serious types of tackles by the match review committee that result in either a Grade 2 or a Grade 3 charge. We want to make sure that they are sin binned or sent off. 80% though does give you an indication that across the course of the season, the referees have been reasonably consistent with this. And none of that justifies the error that was made on the weekend. So I'm not making excuses, I'm just, again, trying to put some context around it. In some ways, we've been, because we have been reasonably consistent with this, it in some ways leads to the discussion or the comments that we've had over the course of the weekend, where we've conditioned everyone to almost recognise what results in a sin bin or a send-off. And then when it doesn't happen, everyone's up in arms. But that can only happen if they're getting most of these right. And they are getting most of them right. But it's not good enough to get one wrong in any round of football, because they should be getting them right. So that's really what I wanted to focus on today. I wanted to just acknowledge what happened on the weekend, admit that that was an incorrect decision, and then put it into some context about what happened not only in round 25 but what's happened across the season to date.